Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time not to some dusty battlefield, but into the intricate, perfumed, and often perilous courts of 19th century Ethiopia. Imagine yourself amidst the rugged, breathtaking beauty of the Ethiopian highlands. Sunlight impossibly clear at this altitude glints off silver ornaments, and the air is alive with the murmur of Amharic, the scent of roasting coffee, and the subtle, ever-present undercurrent of political maneuvering. You're about to meet a woman whose intellect and will were as formidable as the mountains surrounding her Empress Taytu Betul. Now navigating 19th century Ethiopian court politics, without a fluent grasp of Ge'ez, a network of loyal spies, and a well-placed aunt who knows all the secrets, you probably wouldn't last a week, let alone rise to become a pivotal force against colonial powers. It's a world where a misplaced word could be fatal, and a strategic marriage could shift the fate of an empire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below. It's always cool to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins not in a grand palace, but in the rarefied air of a noble family sometime around the year 1851. You are born into the Ethiopian aristocracy, a world where lineage is not just a matter of pride, but a critical currency of power and influence. Picture yourself as a young girl, Taytu Betul, taking your first breaths in the Samian province, a dramatic landscape of jagged peaks and deep escarpments in northern Ethiopia. Her family tree wasn't just a tree, it was practically a national forest with branches reaching into almost every important noble house across the land, from Samian and Gojam to Tigray and the influential Yeju Oromo dynasty. This intricate web of connections is your birthright, a safety net, and a launching pad all in one. Your name, Taytu, means sunshine. A beautiful, hopeful name for a girl born into a period of Ethiopian history often called the Zemene Mesafint, the Age of Princes, a time of disunity and competing regional lords. Life for a noble child like you, young Taytu, is a blend of privilege and expectation. While your early years are likely spent in the relative seclusion of your family's estates, perhaps near Debre Tabor, which itself had served as a kind of imperial capital during the Zemene Mesafint, you are never far from the whispers of power. A mainstream historical fact of this era is that Ethiopian nobility placed immense importance on genealogy and meticulously planned strategic marriages to consolidate power and territory. Your future alliances, your very marriageability, are subjects of quiet discussion almost from the moment you are born. You wouldn't be toiling in the fields, of course. Instead, your days are filled with a different kind of learning. While details about the formal education of noble girls in this period are somewhat scarce, it's highly probable that you receive instruction from priests and learned individuals within your household. You learn to read and write Amharic, the lingua franca of the court, and perhaps even Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language. The rhythms of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, with its vibrant feasts, solemn fasts, and rich traditions, shape your spiritual world. You memorize psalms, listen to epic tales of saints and warriors, and absorb the deep history of your ancient Christian kingdom. This education isn't just academic. It's a cultural immersion teaching you the poetry, the proverbs, and the subtle codes of Ethiopian society. A quirky tidbit from this time is the importance of kine, a highly sophisticated form of Amharic poetry characterized by its wax and gold structure. An obvious surface, meaning the wax concealing a deeper, often witty or profound interpretation, the gold. Learning to understand, and perhaps even compose kine, would have sharpened your intellect and your ability to appreciate nuanced communication, a vital skill in courtly life. You are not just a passive recipient of this education. Even as a young girl, there's a keen intelligence in your eyes, an observant nature that misses little. You see the way your father, Betel Haile Mariam, and other male relatives navigate the complex political landscape. You listen to the discussions, the debates, the carefully worded messages carried by envoys. Little Taytu wasn't just playing with dolls if she even had them. She was probably mentally arranging them in strategic political alliances and negotiating trade agreements for their tiny imaginary territories. You absorb all this early exposure to statecraft, filing away the lessons of power, loyalty, and betrayal. The precise details of Taytu's earliest education and the specific influences that shaped her political acumen remain subjects of lively discussion among historians, given the scarcity of contemporary records focusing on noble women's childhoods. But the environment itself was a powerful teacher. The Ethiopian highlands. Your home are breathtakingly beautiful but also rugged and demanding. Life here, even for the nobility, isn't all about leisurely afternoons sipping TG the honey wine, though there's certainly some of that. It's also about understanding the land, the seasons, the people who work it. It's about resilience. It's also hope that goat doesn't wander off because it represents a significant family asset and possibly dinner for quite a few days. This connection to the land and its practicalities might well have contributed to your later pragmatism. You are of the Amhara people, but your Oromo heritage through the Yeju dynasty is also significant, giving you a broader understanding of Ethiopia's diverse ethnic makeup. As you grow, you witness firsthand the shifting allegiances, the regional rivalries, and the constant struggle for dominance that characterizes the Age of Princes. You understand that in this world, a sharp mind and a strong will are as crucial as noble birth. And yours, young Taytu, is already showing signs of being exceptionally sharp. The sunshine of your name might well refer not just to a bright disposition, but to the fierce, illuminating intelligence that will one day help guide Ethiopia through some of its most challenging times, casting long shadows on those who underestimate you. Your early life is the crucible in which that formidable intellect is forged. Your sharp mind, young Taytu, is indeed being forged in a crucible, and that crucible is the Ethiopia of the mid-19th century, a land of breathtaking beauty, ancient faith, and profound political fragmentation. As you grow from a girl into a young woman, the world outside your family's immediate sphere is a complex, often chaotic chessboard of competing powers. This era, the Zemene Mesafint, or Age of Princes, has been rumbling on for generations effectively since the mid-18th century. It's a period where the central authority of the Solomonic emperors, who trace their lineage all the way back to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, has become more symbolic than actual. The emperor in the traditional capital of Gondar. He had a magnificent title, a very nice crown, and about as much real power as the official taste tester for extremely bland porridge. The real power lies with regional lords, formidable warlords known as Rases or Dejazmaches, who rule their territories like virtually independent sovereigns. Think of it as a sort of Ethiopian Game of Thrones, but with more stunning mountain scenery and considerably less CGI dragons. Though the political backstabbing could be just as fierce. These weren't just local governors. They were more like mini-kings, with their own armies, their own systems of taxation, often involving a share of harvests or livestock, and probably their own incredibly dramatic entrance music whenever they swept into a fortified amba or a temporary encampment. Your own homeland in Semyon is one such power center ruled by powerful nobles, your relatives among them. To the north lies Tigray with its own ancient traditions and ambitious leaders controlling vital trade routes to the Red Sea. To the south and west is Gojam, another fiercely independent region. And further south, still the kingdom of Shewa, ruled by its own line of princes, is beginning to emerge as a significant power, though, at the time of your early youth, it's just one more piece on this complicated board. Alliances in the Zemene Mesafint were about as stable as a unicyclist attempting to juggle flaming torches on a very windy day. Today's trusted ally, who swore blood oaths with you over a shared horn of Teji, could very easily be tomorrow's bitter enemy laying siege to your mountain stronghold or liberating your cattle with surprising enthusiasm. Historians actively debate the precise starting and ending points of the Zemene Mesafint, as well as the degree to which it represented a total breakdown of central authority versus a more complex rebalancing of power between the imperial center and the provinces. But for the people living through it, it often meant uncertainty and instability. A mainstream historical fact is that this period, lasting roughly from 1769 to 1855, saw constant low-level warfare between these regional magnates. Battles were fought, territories changed hands, and the common peasantry often bore the brunt of this incessant conflict. Imagine trying to plant your crops or raise your livestock when you're never quite sure if one Ross's army or another's is going to sweep through demanding provisions or conscripting your sons. Famine and insecurity were frequent companions for many ordinary Ethiopians. This constant state of flux, this struggle for supremacy among the lords, would have been a defining feature of the stories and news reaching your young ears. The religious landscape, while predominantly Ethiopian Orthodox Christian, wasn't entirely monolithic either. Within the church itself, there were sometimes fierce theological debates. For example, over the nature of Christ's birth, the Sost-Lidet controversy being a particularly divisive one, which could at times map onto political rivalries with different regional lords championing different doctrinal interpretations. It added another layer of complexity to an already tangled web. Furthermore, Ethiopia had and still has a significant Muslim population, particularly in the eastern lowlands, and among some Oromo communities. While relations were often peaceful at a local level, religious identity could also be a factor in the broader political alignments and conflicts of the era. And beyond Ethiopia's own internal squabbles, the faintest tremors of external pressures are beginning to be felt. To the north and west, Egypt, under the ambitious Muhammad Ali dynasty, is expanding its influence up the Nile, encroaching on Ethiopian borderlands. Across the Red Sea, European powers, particularly Britain and France, are starting to take a more active interest in the Horn of Africa, driven by strategic considerations, like the route to India and the burgeoning trade in ivory, coffee, and unfortunately slaves. Though Ethiopia itself was not a major source for the transatlantic trade. These foreign powers are still distant shadows during your childhood, but their growing presence is a harbinger of future challenges. Their ships are appearing more frequently, their explorers and missionaries are making tentative forays inland. Living amidst this fragmentation, observing the consequences of disunity, must have profoundly shaped your worldview, young Taytu. You would have seen how personal ambition among the lords often trumped the common good, how a lack of central authority weakened the entire nation, making it vulnerable. This environment would have instilled in you a deep appreciation for strong leadership, for unity, and perhaps a healthy dose of skepticism towards anyone promising an easy alliance. You are learning in the most practical way possible that power is a fickle thing easily lost if not carefully guarded and astutely wielded. A quirky tidbit from this era of mobile power centers is that some of these powerful regional lords didn't have fixed capitals in the modern sense. Instead, they maintained large mobile encampments that functioned as their administrative and military headquarters. These tent cities could be vast, moving with the Raz, his army, his court, and all their retainers across the landscape. Imagine your entire capital city, the treasury, the archives such as they were, the royal kitchens, everything, having to pack up and relocate every few months. It would make planning your commute an absolute nightmare, and probably wasn't great for long-term infrastructure development. Darling, have you seen the Imperial Seal? I'm sure I packed it with the second best tent. This, then, is the Ethiopia of your youth. A patchwork of proud, fiercely independent regions. A land of constant political maneuvering, where the idea of a truly unified nation under a strong emperor seems like a distant memory or perhaps a future dream. It's a challenging dynamic and often dangerous world, but it's also the perfect training ground for a future empress, renowned for her astute diplomacy and unwavering resolve. The lessons learned watching these princes and warlords joust for power will serve you well. The Ethiopia of your youth, that vibrant, volatile patchwork of competing lordships we just talked about, is the stage upon which your own life drama begins to unfold with increasing significance. You Taytu Betul are now a woman in your early 30s, a product of that very same aristocratic, politically charged environment. And this isn't your first foray into the world of strategic alliances cemented by marriage vows. This wasn't Taytu's first royal rodeo, so to speak. You've had previous marriages, records suggest perhaps 3 or 4, to other notable figures. In 19th century Ethiopian noble society, divorce and remarriage weren't particularly scandalous or uncommon, especially when political considerations were at play. Think of it less as a series of romantic misadventures and more as building an impressive resume of regional connections and gaining invaluable experience in the art of negotiation, both personal and political. Each union, whether brief or lasting, would have added to your understanding of the complex interplay of power across the Ethiopian landscape. Now around the year 1883, a new and pivotal chapter begins. Your path intersects with that of a man whose ambitions are beginning to reshape the Ethiopian map, Saleh Mariam of Shewa, better known to history as Menelik. At this point, Menelik is the Negus or King of Shewa, a prosperous and increasingly powerful region in the south-central part of Ethiopia. He too boasts Solomonic lineage, tracing his ancestry back through the Shewan branch of the imperial family. Menelik is intelligent, forward-thinking in many respects, and possessed of a burning ambition not just to rule Shewa but to play a much larger role on the Ethiopian stage, perhaps even to revive the power of the imperial throne itself. Shewa under his rule and that of his predecessors has been consolidating its strength, building its army, and cautiously expanding its influence. Menelik was ambitious, sure, but even he knew that trying to truly unite the fractured empire without some serious northern street cred was like trying to climb one of those jagged Semian mountains we talked about in Flimsy Sandals. He needed more than just Shewan power. The broader political context is crucial here. The reigning emperor of Ethiopia is Johannes IV, a Tigrayan prince who had fought his way to the imperial throne, ending the most chaotic phase of the Zemene Mesafint. Menelik, as king of Shewa, is technically Johannes's vassal, but he's a very powerful and often restless one, a clear rival for ultimate supremacy. Emperor Johannes keeps a wary eye on his Shewan subordinate. This is where you Taytu Betul enter Menelik's strategic calculations and he yours. Your marriage to Menelik in 1883 is far more than a simple union of two individuals. It's a masterful political alliance. A mainstream historical fact is that this marriage was hugely significant, uniting your formidable northern family networks, your connections to the nobility of Semi and Tigray, Gojam, and your Yeju Oromo heritage, with Menelik's burgeoning Shewan power base. For Menelik, marrying you is a strategic masterstroke. You provide him with crucial legitimacy and influence in the northern provinces regions that Emperor Johannes might consider his own backyard. Your lineage and connections can help smooth his path, win over wavering nobles, and broaden his support beyond Shewa. Their wedding invitation, if such a formal thing existed in quite that way, probably had RSVP. And by the way, please indicate the approximate number of loyal riflemen you'll be bringing as your +1s subtly inscribed at the bottom. It was a major networking event sanctified by the church naturally. From your perspective, Taytu, this is no passive arrangement. You are an experienced woman, renowned for your intelligence, strong character, and noble bearing. You understand the political chessboard intimately. Marrying Menelik, a rising star with serious imperial ambitions, offers you a platform on a much grander scale than any of your previous alliances. It aligns your own considerable personal and familial assets with a man who has the potential to unify the country and restore the dignity of the empire. Historians discuss the exact degree of romantic feeling versus political calculation in Taytu and Menelik's union, though most agree that its strategic importance for both was undeniable, regardless of personal affection levels. And certainly a partnership of mutual respect and shared ambition seems evident from their later interactions. The wedding itself would have been a grand affair steeped in the ancient traditions of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, filled with feasting music and displays of noble pageantry. Imagine the colorful silk and velvet robes, the glint of silver and gold ornaments, the solemn chanting of the priests, the rhythmic beat of drums. But beneath the surface of these celebrations lies the hard currency of political maneuvering. You are not just a bride. You are a symbol of a powerful new coalition, a bridge between North and South. You bring to this marriage your impeccable aristocratic credentials, your network of influential relatives across key regions, your sharp intellect, your unwavering resolve, and by all accounts, a formidable personality that commands respect. You are known to be deeply religious, patriotic, and highly intelligent. A quirky tidbit often mentioned is that you were reportedly a very skilled player of Centaure's traditional Ethiopian chess. Whether a casual pastime or a more serious pursuit, it serves as a fitting metaphor for your strategic mind. You weren't just marrying a king, you were making a decisive, calculated move on the grand chessboard of Ethiopian power politics, positioning yourself to become a queen, perhaps even an empress. Menelik, for his part, brings his kingship of Shewa, a well-organized and loyal army, a reputation for effective administration, significant wealth accumulated through trade and tribute, and his own undeniable drive. Together, you represent a potent combination of lineage, political acumen, military strength, and shared ambition. This union doesn't just tie two people together, it begins to tie a fractured nation together laying the groundwork for the eventual re-emergence of a strong, unified Ethiopian empire capable of facing the mounting external pressures that are looming on the horizon. Your journey with Menelik, a partnership that will shape the destiny of Ethiopia, has truly begun. Section 4. So there you are, Taytu Betul united with Negus Menelik of Shewa. This marriage, a finely crafted key in the complex lock of Ethiopian power. You don't just pack your metaphorical bags and move south to Shewa as a demure decorative spouse? Oh no, that's not your style at all. You arrive in Menelik's realm, likely establishing yourself initially in his existing capitals, like Ankober, a historic Shewan stronghold, or perhaps the newer mountain settlement of Entoto, as a force to be reckoned with. Taytu didn't just move to Shewa. She practically became its unofficial political weather vane, instantly sensing which way the winds of influence were blowing and often subtly redirecting them with a skill that would make a modern meteorologist jealous. Shewa under Menelik is a dynamic place. While still deeply rooted in Ethiopian tradition, there's a palpable energy here, a sense of ambition, and perhaps a greater openness to certain modernizing ideas, especially regarding military technology and administration, compared to some of the more conservative northern courts. As Menelik's principal wife, his Itsege, a title that would later translate more fully to Empress Consort, you are immediately at the center of this burgeoning power. And you don't waste any time in making your presence felt, not through overt commands. Initially, but through astute observation, strategic relationship building, and the undeniable weight of your intellect and lineage, you quickly become more than just Menelik's wife. You become one of his most trusted confidants and advisors. A mainstream historical fact is that even before Menelik ascended to the imperial throne, Taytu Betul was widely recognized for her strong character, sharp political mind, and active involvement in the affairs of his Shewan court. Menelik, a shrewd leader in his own right, clearly values your counsel. He sees your experience, your understanding of the northern political landscape, something crucial for his own broader ambitions, and your unwavering patriotism. Menelik was no fool, but having you as his sounding board was like having a super smart, highly intuitive political GPS. Recalculating route. That proposed alliance with Ras so-and-so has a high probability of ending in him trying to borrow half your treasury. Suggest deploying charm offensive, followed by subtle reminder of your standing army. You begin to weave your own network within Shewa. You cultivate relationships with the Shewan nobility, the influential clergy, key military commanders, and even it's said with common folk who gain access to you. Your status as a high-born northern aristocrat, combined with your new position as wife of the Shewan king, gives you a unique vantage point. You are the bridge, remember? You can mediate disputes, gather intelligence, and promote individuals you deem loyal and competent, subtly shaping the court around you and Menelik. Your household becomes a center of influence in its own right, a place where petitioners might seek favor, and where political currents are subtly tested and directed. Your deep Christian faith is also a cornerstone of your public persona and genuine character. You are known for your piety, your support for the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and your patronage of religious institutions. A quirky tidbit often mentioned is your keen interest in and knowledge of traditional Ethiopian medicine and herbal remedies. This might have been purely for personal and household use, or it could have extended to a broader concern for the well-being of those around you, adding another layer to your image as a caring, albeit formidable figure. It certainly wouldn't hurt to be known as someone who could not only outwit a rival in court, but also knew which herbs could cure your terrible indigestion after one too many celebratory feasts. Life in the Shewan court, even before it becomes the imperial court, is a constant dance of protocol hospitality and underlying political currents. Shewan court life wasn't just endless feasts of delicious Dorawat spicy chicken stew and Kitfo minced raw beef. It was also a high-stakes game of who knows who owes who's subtly undermining whom, and who's currently trying to get their unqualified nephew appointed to a lucrative governorship. You navigate this intricate world with grace and steel. You understand the importance of public appearance, of projecting an image of queenly dignity and unwavering resolve. Your pronouncements, even in these earlier Shewan days, carry weight. The precise mechanisms and extent of Taytu's early influence on Menelik's policies in Shewa are sometimes difficult to reconstruct perfectly, as contemporary accounts often focused on the Negus, the male ruler, as was typical of historical records of the time. Yet, as historians delve deeper, your hand, or your voice is often inferred in key decisions, particularly those involving diplomacy with the Northern Lord's appointments to sensitive positions, and crucially, in discussions regarding the increasing presence and pressure from foreign powers, especially the Italians. Even this early on, your healthy skepticism towards European colonial ambitions is becoming apparent. You are not easily charmed by foreign emissaries or their often one-sided proposals. You are not just passively observing. You are actively participating, learning, and shaping. You are Menelik's partner in a very real sense, sharing the burdens of leadership and the strategic planning for a future that both of you envision as brighter and more unified for Ethiopia. The Shewan court is your proving ground, the place where you hone the skills and solidify the reputation that will make you such a pivotal figure when Menelik finally claims the imperial title. Your influence is growing. Your voice is becoming more authoritative, and your vision for Ethiopia, closely aligned with Menelik's, but also distinctly your own, is beginning to take clear shape. The keen political operator is already very much in evidence, laying the groundwork for the empress you are destined to become. Your influence in Shewa is growing, Taytu, your partnership with Menelik solidifying into a formidable political force. But Menelik's ambitions, and by extension yours, extend far beyond the borders of his Shewan kingdom. The ultimate prize, the imperial throne of Ethiopia, and the unification of its fractured lands looms large in his strategic vision. And so begins a period of intense activity, a series of military campaigns and diplomatic maneuvers designed to consolidate Menelik's power and expand his dominion. This is the road to empire, and it's a path often paved with conflict as much as with negotiation. Menelik wasn't just collecting new territories like they were rare postage stamps, you see. Each campaign was a high-stakes chess game, a delicate balance of showing strength, forging alliances, and when necessary, engaging in outright warfare. Emperor Johannes IV. The Tigrayan ruler still nominally holds the imperial title. However, he is frequently preoccupied with external threats, particularly the Mahdist forces from Sudan, who are launching increasingly aggressive incursions into western Ethiopia. This situation, while dangerous for the empire as a whole, also provides Menelik with a degree of freedom to pursue his own agenda in the south and west, steadily building his power base. A mainstream historical fact is that Menelik II, while still king of Shewa, undertook numerous military campaigns throughout the 1870s and 1880s, significantly expanding his territory and authority, which were crucial steps towards his eventual claim to the imperial throne after Emperor Johannes IV's death in 1889. These aren't simple wars of conquest in the way you might imagine a monolithic army steamrolling over unprepared foes. The Ethiopian landscape with its rugged mountains and fortified ambas, those natural flat-topped mountain fortresses, makes direct assault incredibly difficult. Conquering some of those Ethiopian ambas was like trying to persuade a very large, very stubborn cat to take a bath. They were naturally defended, often fiercely garrisoned, and supplies for a long siege were always a concern. Campaigns often involve complex negotiations, playing rival factions against each other, long marches through difficult terrain, and periods of tense standoff. Cattle raids, a long-standing feature of Ethiopian warfare, are common, both as a means of provisioning armies and weakening opponents. Your role in all this, Taytu, is multifaceted and absolutely vital. While Menelik is leading his armies in the field, you are far from idle. Back in Shewa, you are the anchor, the steady hand ensuring the kingdom remains stable and supportive of his efforts. While Menelik was out negotiating sometimes with the persuasive argument of a newly acquired cannon, you were ensuring the home front didn't unravel like a poorly knitted scarf. You manage resources, oversee administration, and maintain lines of communication. Your intelligence network, cultivated through your northern connections and your growing influence in Shewa, provides Menelik with crucial information about the loyalties and intentions of various regional lords. More than just logistical support, you provide invaluable strategic counsel. Your understanding of the complex political tapestry of northern Ethiopia, your ancestral home, is particularly crucial. You can advise Menelik on which alliances are worth pursuing, which rivals might be amenable to negotiation, and which ones will likely require a show of force. Your sharp judgment of character helps him to assess the reliability of potential allies and the vulnerabilities of adversaries. You are in essence his chief political strategist and diplomat. Even if you don't always ride out with the troops yourself during these particular Shewan expansionist phases, The historical interpretation of Menelik's expansionist campaigns is complex, and it's important to acknowledge this. There's ongoing scholarly debate focusing on the balance between genuine unification efforts for a stronger Ethiopia, the motivations of imperial ambition, and the impact on the diverse peoples and regions incorporated into the growing Shuan sphere of influence. For those who resisted Menelik's expansion, these campaigns could mean hardship loss and the imposition of a new authority. Unification historically is rarely a bloodless affair, and the creation of a larger Ethiopian state under Menelik involved bringing diverse ethnic groups and formerly autonomous regions under a centralizing Shuan administration. A quirky and fascinating tidbit that highlights the deep intertwining of faith and military endeavors in Ethiopia is the practice of carrying tabots with the armies. These sacred consecrated wooden tablets, which represent the Ark of the Covenant found in every Ethiopian Orthodox church, were often taken on campaigns. The presence of a tabot carried by priests was believed to grant divine favor, protection, and legitimacy to the army's cause. Imagine the sight columns of warriors marching through the mountains accompanied by chanting priests carefully bearing these holy objects, a visible testament to their belief that God was on their side. Your unwavering support for Menelik, your shared vision of a unified and strong Ethiopia, provides a powerful ideological backbone to these endeavors. You reinforce the legitimacy of Menelik's Solomonic lineage and his destiny to restore the glory of the empire. Your presence, your piety, and your fierce patriotism lend moral authority to his campaigns. You are not just the wife of an ambitious king. You are seen as a true daughter of Ethiopia, deeply committed to its integrity and sovereignty. This is particularly important in winning over hearts and minds, especially among the northern nobility who might be wary of Shuan dominance but respect your own impeccable northern credentials. The road to empire is long and arduous. It involves forging Ethiopia region by region, sometimes through alliance, sometimes through coercion, sometimes through outright battle. Each successful campaign strengthens Menelik's position, brings more resources under his control, and makes his claim to the imperial throne increasingly inevitable. And by his side in counsel, in support, and in unwavering resolve, you, Taytu Betul, are playing an indispensable role in this historic transformation, helping to lay the very foundations of modern Ethiopia. As Menelik's campaigns continue to expand his influence and the dream of a unified Ethiopian empire under his rule inches closer to reality, the practicalities of governing a larger, more complex realm come to the fore. The existing Shuan capitals, whether the historic fortress of Enkober or the more recent settlement atop Mount Entoto, are proving inadequate for the burgeoning administration and the grand vision you both share. Entoto in particular, where Menelik had established a new base, is, to put it mildly, a bit challenging. Living on Entoto must have been like a permanent camping trip in a very beautiful, very drafty, high-altitude freezer. It was cold, windswept, often shrouded in mist, and the surrounding forests were being rapidly depleted for firewood, making it even bleaker. Access was difficult, and it wasn't an ideal location for a future imperial city designed to be a hub of a restored empire. This is where your vision, Taytu, comes into play, with remarkable clarity and foresight, leading to one of your most celebrated contributions, the founding of Addis Ababa. You, with your keen eye for practicalities and perhaps a personal preference for a slightly less frigid existence, begin to look for alternatives. Legend and historical accounts strongly suggest that you were particularly drawn to an area in the valley at the foot of Mount Entoto, a place known by its Oromo name, Finfini, which translates to hot springs, or natural springs. Imagine yourself perhaps on excursions down from the chilly heights of Entoto, encountering these warm, mineral-rich waters. The air is milder here, the land more fertile, the scenery gentler. You recognize its potential immediately. Taytu basically founded this lovely valley with natural hot tubs and was like, "Menelik, darling, I've identified the perfect location for our new capital. It has therapeutic waters, a much more agreeable climate, and excellent potential for future 5-star spa resorts, once we invent those." He, ever the pragmatist and military man, was probably more focused on lines of defense, but happy wife, happy empire, as they say, or should have. A mainstream historical fact is that Empress Taytu Betul is widely credited with playing a pivotal role in selecting the site for Addis Ababa and in bestowing upon it its beautiful name. The official founding is generally dated to 1886. While Menelik might have initially been hesitant to move from the more defensible, if uncomfortable heights of Entoto, your enthusiasm for the Finfini area, coupled with your persuasive arguments about its suitability for a grand capital, eventually won him over. You saw not just a pleasant valley, but a place where a great city could rise. One charming, quirky tidbit often shared is that you were particularly taken with the abundance of delicate mimosa flowers blooming in the area. This floral beauty is said to have inspired you to name the nascent settlement Addis Ababa, meaning new flower in Amharic. Imagine the scene amidst discussions of strategic positioning and water sources. You Taytu bring this touch of poetry, this vision of new beginnings and blossoming potential. Picture the committee meeting for naming the new capital, if such a formal thing happened. Various serious martial-sounding names are likely proposed, full of historical weight and gravitas. Then you simply smile, perhaps gesturing towards a cluster of bright blooms, and suggest, "What if we call it New Flower?" And because you are Taytu with your growing influence and respected judgment, the name sticks imbued with hope and a sense of fresh promise. While Taytu's role in identifying the potential of the Finfini area and naming Addis Ababa is generally accepted, the precise timeline of its establishment and the exact interplay of her influence versus Menelik's strategic considerations in the final decision are points occasionally nuanced by historical discussion. Some accounts suggest you began by building a house for yourself near the hot springs, establishing a personal foothold, which then encouraged Menelik and other nobles to follow suit. Others emphasize a more joint decision-making process. Regardless of the precise sequence, your initiative was undeniably central. The early development of Addis Ababa was likely organic, perhaps even a bit haphazard at first. You and Menelik would have overseen the construction of your respective residences, Menelik's palace, the Gebi, eventually forming the core around which the city grew. Nobles and followers were encouraged or perhaps strategically persuaded to build their own homes and establish their households in the new location, gradually transforming it from a royal encampment into a permanent settlement. The fertile land allowed for gardens, and later the famous eucalyptus trees, introduced by Menelik, actually to combat the firewood shortage that had plagued Entoto, would come to characterize the city's landscape, though your initial vision was likely more about the open spaces and the life-giving water. This act of founding a new capital is profoundly symbolic. It's a clear statement of intent, a break from the shifting temporary capitals of the Zemen and Mesafint, and a commitment to building a stable, enduring center for a unified Ethiopia. It reflects your and Menelik's shared ambition to create a modern state, one capable of managing its diverse territories and projecting strength both internally and externally. And at the heart of this monumental undertaking is your insight, your appreciation for a place that offered not just strategic advantage, but also comfort, beauty, and the promise of growth. Addis Ababa. The new flower stands today as a sprawling, vibrant metropolis, the diplomatic capital of Africa in many ways, and its existence is a lasting testament to your vision and determination, Taytu. You didn't just choose a location. You planted the seed for a city that would become central to Ethiopia's identity and its future. The new flower Addis Ababa is slowly taking root under your watchful eye, Taytu, a symbol of hope and renewed imperial vision. Menelik's campaigns continue to consolidate his power, and the dream of a truly unified Ethiopia seems more tangible than ever. But even as you and Menelik work to build this future from within, a shadow begins to stretch across the Horn of Africa from without. This is the late 1880s, the height of the scramble for Africa, when European powers are carving up the continent with an alarming appetite, drawing lines on maps in distant European capitals that often ignore the realities on the ground. And Italy, fashionably late to this colonial banquet, is particularly eager to establish its own empire. Italy was like that guest who arrives just as the main course is being cleared and desperately tries to convince the host that they deserve a full 3-course meal plus dessert. Their gaze is fixed firmly on Ethiopia. You begin to feel the growing pressure of these Italian colonial ambitions. A mainstream historical fact is that Italy, seeking to build a significant colonial presence, had established a foothold in Massawa on the Red Sea coast in modern-day Eritrea back in 1885. From this coastal base, they are cautiously but steadily expanding their influence inland, pushing towards the Ethiopian highlands. Their agents, diplomats, and traders are becoming more frequent visitors to the courts of various Ethiopian lords, including Menelik's. They come bearing gifts offering treaties of friendship and commerce, and crucially, selling modern firearms, something every ambitious Ethiopian leader, including Menelik, is keen to acquire. Menelik's early dealings with the Italians are a complex mix of pragmatism and caution. Historians continue to analyze Menelik's early dealings with the Italians, debating whether he was naively underestimating their ultimate colonial aims or skillfully playing a dangerous game to acquire arms and consolidate his own power before a confrontation became inevitable. He needs weapons to modernize his army and to secure his position against internal rivals, including at times Emperor Johannes IV himself. The Italians and other Europeans are a source for these vital resources. He might have initially seen them as a potential, if temporary, counterweight to other powers, or simply as merchants with whom he could do business. But you, Taytu, from the very outset possess a profound and unwavering skepticism towards these European interlopers, particularly the Italians. Your intelligence, your deep-seated patriotism, and perhaps a more intuitive understanding of the long game of colonial expansion make you exceptionally wary. Taytu's Italian skepticism meter was probably so finely tuned it could detect insincere flattery from an envoy at 50 paces, even if he was offering really shiny new rifles and promising eternal friendship. You see beyond the polite diplomatic language and the gleaming modern trinkets. You sense the underlying ambition, the desire for control, the condescension that often tinges their interactions. Your suspicions are fueled by the Italians' actions. They attempt to play Ethiopian lords off against each other, seeking to exploit the internal divisions that have plagued the country for so long. Their treaty proposals, even these early ones, often contain subtly worded clauses that hint at an unequal relationship, a desire for protectorate status, rather than genuine partnership. A quirky tidbit is that many early European agents or explorers in Africa, including some Italians in Ethiopia, initially presented themselves in seemingly benign roles. As scientists studying flora and fauna, geographers mapping unknown territories, or even as humanitarians dedicated to abolishing the slave trade. This wolf in sheep's clothing approach, designed to gain access and gather intelligence before revealing more overt political aims, would have done nothing to allay your deep-seated mistrust. You can imagine yourself observing these scientists, who seem far more interested in mapping strategic mountain passes than in collecting butterflies. You become a crucial voice of caution in Menelik's court. While Menelik is weighing the strategic benefits of acquiring Italian arms or signing seemingly advantageous commercial agreements, you are there urging vigilance, reminding him of Ethiopia's long history of independence and dissecting the potential hidden meanings in every diplomatic overture. When the Italians presented a treaty for consideration, you probably insisted on having it translated by multiple independent sources, then cross-referencing those translations and maybe even consulting an expert in ancient trickster god mythology just to be safe. Read the fine print, Menelik, you might advise, and then read between the lines, and then let's consider what they aren't saying. Your influence isn't about knee-jerk xenophobia. It's rooted in a fierce desire to protect Ethiopian sovereignty, a sovereignty that has been maintained for centuries against various external threats. You understand that accepting too much assistance or conceding even seemingly minor points of sovereignty can be the thin end of the wedge leading to greater dependence and eventual subjugation. You see how other African nations are falling under colonial rule, and you are determined that Ethiopia will not share their fate. The atmosphere in Addis Ababa, and indeed in Menelik's court, wherever it may be, begins to subtly shift. Alongside the excitement of internal consolidation and nation-building, there's a growing awareness of this external threat. Discussions about military readiness, about the reliability of foreign promises, about the true intentions of these European powers become more frequent. And in these discussions, your clear-sighted, cautious, and resolute voice, Taytu, is increasingly influential. You are helping to shape Ethiopia's response, steeling its resolve and preparing the ground for the diplomatic and military confrontations that seem increasingly unavoidable if Ethiopia is to remain a beacon of freedom on a rapidly colonizing continent. The early colonial pressures are mounting, but so too is Ethiopia's and your own determination to resist. Your warnings about Italian intentions, Taytu, that deep-seated skepticism you've harbored, are about to be chillingly vindicated. The political landscape of Ethiopia undergoes a seismic shift in March 1889. Emperor Johannes IV, Menelik's overlord and rival, is tragically killed in battle at Galabat Matema, fighting against modest forces from Sudan. This event, while a blow to Ethiopia's defense against the Mahdists, flings open the doors of opportunity for Menelik. He swiftly proclaims himself Nagusa Nagast, King of Kings Emperor of Ethiopia. Now, as the newly crowned Emperor Menelik II, one of his immediate priorities is to consolidate his rule and secure international recognition, particularly from the European powers, who are circling the Horn of Africa like particularly well-dressed sharks. Enter once again the Italians, ever eager to formalize their relationship with the new Ethiopian leadership. On May 2, 1889, in the town of Wuchale, also known by its Italian spelling, Ucciali, Menelik's representatives, and the Italian envoy Count Pietro Antonelli sign a treaty. This document, the Treaty of Wuchale, is intended to define the relationship between Ethiopia and Italy, covering issues like friendship, trade, and the borders of Italy's Eritrean colony. On the surface, many of its articles seem straightforward, even beneficial, offering Ethiopia access to loans and modern expertise. But lurking within this seemingly innocuous agreement is the now infamous Article 17, a masterpiece of diplomatic duplicity. This is where your story Taytu intersects dramatically with the fate of your nation. The Treaty of Wuchale had two versions, one in Amharic, Ethiopia's official language, and one in Italian. And Article 17, the crucial clause dealing with Ethiopia's foreign relations, differed significantly between the two. The Amharic version stated that the Emperor of Ethiopia could, if he so chose, avail himself of the Italian government as an intermediary for his dealings with other European powers. The operative Amharic's word yekalali yichikaichat lal clearly implies option possibility he can. However, the Italian version of Article 17 stated that the Emperor of Ethiopia consents to use the Italian government for all his foreign affairs, consente di servirsi, which the Italians interpreted as must or is obliged to, effectively making Ethiopia an Italian protectorate unable to conduct its own foreign policy independently. It was a subtle but devastating difference. One version offered optional assistance, the other imposed mandatory submission. The Amharic was a friendly suggestion of, hey, if you need help talking to those other European chaps, we could give you a hand, while the Italian read more like, surprise, you now have a new boss for all your international chats, and it's us. All your foreign policy are belong to Rome. A mainstream historical fact is that this discrepancy in Article 17 of the Treaty of Wuchale became the central point of contention between Ethiopia and Italy, directly leading to the First Italo-Ethiopian War. Scholarly discussion continues regarding whether the discrepancy in Article 16 was a deliberate mistranslation and act of diplomatic deceit by the Italians from the outset, or a misunderstanding exacerbated by linguistic nuances and differing interpretations of diplomatic conventions, though the outcome heavily favored Italian colonial ambitions. Given the context of the scramble for Africa and Italy's known colonial aspirations, many historians, and certainly Ethiopians at the time, leaned heavily towards deliberate deception. Your role, Taytu, in uncovering and fiercely opposing this diplomatic sleight of hand is legendary. Your pre-existing suspicion of Italian motives would have put you on high alert. While Menelik, in the early days of his reign, might have been more inclined to give the Italians the benefit of the doubt, or was perhaps preoccupied with consolidating his internal power, you were not so easily swayed. When the implications of the Italian version of Article 16 began to surface, perhaps when Italian diplomats started behaving as if Ethiopia were already their protectorate, or when Ethiopian attempts to communicate directly with other European powers were arrogantly rerouted through Rome, your astuteness and resolve came to the fore. Imagine the scene in the imperial court in Addis Ababa as the truth of this duplicity becomes clear. When Taytu found out about Article 17, her legendary composure likely experienced a significant tremor. You can picture her demanding the original Italian parchment, perhaps comparing it word for word with the Amharic text, her sharp intellect dissecting every nuance. She, or trusted scholars and advisors close to her who were proficient in Italian and diplomatic language, would have meticulously unpicked the deception. It's often said that you were among the very first, and certainly the most forceful, in recognizing the trap, and in urging Menelik to reject the Italian interpretation unequivocally. Count Pietro Antonelli, the Italian negotiator, was reportedly quite familiar with Menelik and Ethiopian affairs, having been involved for years. This familiarity might have initially fostered a sense of trust on Menelik's part, making the eventual revelation of the deceit feel even more like a personal betrayal, not just a political one. This entire incident is a masterclass in why you should always ensure your translators are fiercely loyal and incredibly pedantic, especially when international treaties are on the table. Optional, obligatory. These aren't minor semantic quibbles when the sovereignty of an ancient empire hangs in the balance. Your outrage. Taytu would have been profound. It wasn't just about a mistranslation. It was about an assault on Ethiopia's independence, an attempt to trick your nation into colonial subservience. You would have rallied support within the court, arguing passionately against any concession to the Italian interpretation. Your firm stance, your refusal to be intimidated or deceived, would have significantly stiffened Menelik's own resolve. He was now faced with a clear choice: accept Italy's claim and become a de facto puppet emperor, or defy a major European power and risk war. Thanks in no small part to your unwavering clarity and courage, Taytu, the path of defiance began to look like the only honorable option. The seeds of Adwa were sown in the deceptive ink of Wuchale. The bombshell of Article 17 in the Treaty of Wuchale has exploded, and the diplomatic fallout is immediate and intense. You, Taytu, having been a primary voice in exposing its duplicitous nature, now find yourself at the forefront of advocating for an ironclad resistance against Italian machinations. The Italians, for their part, are not backing down. They confidently notify other European powers that Ethiopia, by virtue of their version of the treaty, is now an Italian protectorate. This unilateral declaration, based on what you know to be a deceitful distortion of the Amharic text, adds fuel to the fire of Ethiopian indignation. The Italians were sticking to their version of Article 17 like a particularly stubborn barnacle to the hull of a ship. Protectorate, oh yes, absolutely a protectorate. Says so right here in this conveniently smudged Italian ink that only we can truly understand. Emperor Menelik II, deeply angered by the betrayal attempts to resolve the crisis through diplomatic channels. Letters carefully worded and laden with appeals to justice and the sanctity of agreements are exchanged between Addis Ababa and Rome. Menelik patiently explains the discrepancy, emphasizing the clear meaning of the Amharic text. He even writes to other European heads of state, including Queen Victoria of Great Britain and the German Kaiser, seeking their understanding and mediation. But Italy, convinced of its diplomatic coup and eager to assert its colonial dominance, remains intransigent. They see Ethiopia as a prize within their grasp, and Menelik's objections as mere quibbles to be brushed aside. Within Menelik's court, a spectrum of opinions likely emerges. Some counselors, perhaps fearing the military might of a European power, might have advised caution, further negotiation, or even some form of compromise to avoid outright war. Appeasement might have seemed like the safer path to those less resolute than you. But you, Taytu, become the leading voice of the Hawks, the faction advocating for an unwavering, uncompromising stance. If Menelik's court had a chief officer for politely but firmly informing foreign dignitaries that their deceptive treaties are unsuitable for use, even as emergency toilet paper, you would have been the undisputed, unanimously elected candidate. You see with stark clarity that any concession on Article 17, any acceptance of Italy's interpretation, means the erosion of Ethiopian sovereignty, the beginning of the end for Ethiopia's centuries-old independence. Your arguments are powerful and resonate deeply within the court and among the Ethiopian nobility. You appeal to national pride, to Ethiopia's long and storied history as an independent Christian kingdom that predates most European nations. You invoke the memory of past struggles against invaders, the legacy of the Solomonic dynasty. You tirelessly expose the treachery of the Italians, highlighting their deceitful methods and their ultimate aim to colonize Ethiopia, just as they and other European powers are colonizing the rest of Africa. Your words are not just emotional appeals. They are rooted in a sharp, logical understanding of the political realities and the dire consequences of submission. A mainstream historical fact is that Empress Taytu was a notably strong and influential opponent of the Italian interpretation of the Treaty of Wuchale, consistently urging Emperor Menelik II to resist Italian encroachment and playing a pivotal role in the decision to ultimately denounce the treaty. Your reputation for wisdom, piety, and unwavering patriotism lends immense weight to your views. The dynamics within Menelik's court regarding the Italian crisis are subject to ongoing historical analysis, particularly the precise interplay between Taytu's hawkish influence, Menelik's own strategic calculations, and the counsel of other key advisors in the lead-up to the denunciation of the Treaty of Wuchale. However, your consistent and forceful advocacy for resistance undeniably helps to forge a consensus, steeling the resolve of those who might have wavered. You are not just the emperor's wife. You are a recognized political intellect, a leader in your own right. A quirky, though widely recounted tidbit illustrates your directness and fierce spirit. During this period of escalating tension, you are said to have personally confronted Italian envoys, or even Ethiopian officials, whom you suspected of being too sympathetic to the Italian cause. One famous, though perhaps apocryphal quote, attributed to you in a heated exchange with an Italian representative goes something like this: "We will never give you our country. Ethiopia is our mother, and we will not give our mother to anyone." Whether you uttered these exact words or not, they perfectly encapsulate your indomitable spirit and your profound love for your nation. You were not afraid to speak truth to power, even when that power came armed with modern rifles and a condescending colonial attitude. As diplomatic efforts stall and Italy's demands become more insistent, perhaps even accompanied by further military provocations or an increased troop presence in their Eritrean colony, your position for outright rejection of the treaty gains more traction. The Italian intransigence itself becomes your best argument. Finally, in February 1893, Menelik, with your full and unwavering support, indeed with you likely urging him on, whispering, "No retreat, no surrender, and by the way, I've ensured all the good parchment is under lock and key, so you can't be tempted to sign anything else slightly dodgy," takes the decisive step. He formally and publicly renounces the entire Treaty of Wuchale. This is an incredibly bold move, a direct challenge to a European colonial power. It's the diplomatic equivalent of throwing down the gauntlet. There can be no turning back now. Ethiopia, under the joint leadership of Menelik and your resolute spirit Taytu, has chosen the path of resistance whatever the cost. The stage is being set for a confrontation that will echo around the world. The die is cast. Menelik, with your unwavering support and fierce advocacy, Taytu has formally renounced the Treaty of Wuchale. Ethiopia has slammed the door in Italy's face, rejecting its claims of protectorate status. You can imagine the reaction in Rome: shock, indignation, and a burning desire to teach this upstart African empire a lesson. The Italian government, feeling humiliated on the international stage, begins to prepare for a military solution. They are determined to impose their will on Ethiopia by force to make their colonial dream a reality through conquest. Across Ethiopia, a different kind of preparation is underway. Not for aggression, but for a desperate defense of hearth and home, of sovereignty and survival. The air in Addis Ababa, and indeed across the Ethiopian highlands, crackles with a new tension. The diplomatic wrangling is over. The time for words has passed. Now the nation must steel itself for war. In September 1895, Emperor Menelik II issues the Imperial Kitet, the traditional call for general mobilization. Imagine the scene: messengers on swift mules galloping out from the capital, carrying the emperor's decree to every corner of the land. The Great War drums the Negerite thunder from provincial capitals and noblemen's fortresses, their deep resonant beats echoing through the valleys and across the plateaus, a somber, urgent summons to arms. When Menelik and Taytu put out the call to arms, it wasn't like sending a polite email invitation with an optional RSVP. It was more like, Ethiopia is on the brink of a major throwdown with a European colonial power. BYOW, bring your own warriors, and pack provisions. This isn't going to be a short skirmish. Your role, Taytu, in this critical period of mobilization transcends that of a mere advisor or supportive spouse. You become a powerful, visible force in rallying the nation. A mainstream historical fact is that when Emperor Menelik II issued the call for mobilization against the Italians, it was met with a massive and widespread response from across Ethiopia. Regional lords, many of whom had their own rivalries and grievances, put aside their differences to answer the imperial summons, bringing their armies to join the rapidly swelling national force. And your influence is instrumental in achieving this remarkable unity. You leverage your extensive network of family connections, those deep roots you have in the powerful noble houses of Semien, Yeju, Gojam, and Tigray. You send personal messages, appeals, and perhaps even some stern reminders of duty to lords who might be wavering or slow to commit their forces. Your word carries immense weight. If Taytu Betul, the intelligent, patriotic, and deeply respected Empress, personally asked you to join the war effort, you didn't just say, let me check my schedule. You said, yes, Your Majesty. Which direction is the enemy? And do you prefer my war cry to be a booming baritone or a piercing tenor? Her persuasive skills, honed over years of political maneuvering, were now deployed in the service of national survival. Beyond the nobility, your example and your unwavering anti-Italian stance inspire the common people. Tales of your defiance of the Italians, your sharp rebukes to their envoys, your commitment to Ethiopian independence have spread throughout the land. You become a symbol of resistance, a queen ready to defend her nation. Your piety also resonates deeply. This is increasingly framed as a just war, a defense of a Christian nation against an unrighteous aggressor. You are not just calling others to sacrifice, you are preparing to make sacrifices yourself. You begin to organize your own personal contingent of soldiers, as was customary for high-ranking Ethiopian nobles, including formidable women. You are not planning to sit idly in the capital while others fight. The Ethiopian army that assembles is a sight to behold, a vast, diverse host. The exact size of the Ethiopian forces mobilized for the Adwa campaign is still a subject of some historical debate, with estimates varying widely, often between 80,000 to well over 100,000 fighting men. But all accounts agree it was an unprecedented national effort. It's largely a feudal levy system. Each Ras, Dejismach, or lesser noble arrives with his own retainers armed with whatever weapons they possess. This means a fascinating, if somewhat alarming, array of weaponry. You see warriors with modern Remington and Gauss rifles, some ironically acquired from European traders, including the Italians themselves in earlier, less contentious times, alongside men carrying traditional spear shields and shotel sickle-shaped swords. It was like a weapons through the ages exhibition, but with the very real prospect of immediate deadly use. Logistics for such a massive, disparate army are a monumental challenge. Feeding, watering, and supplying ammunition for tens of thousands of soldiers on the march in a rugged country with limited infrastructure is a Herculean task. While Menelik and his commanders oversee the military strategy, you Taytu are undoubtedly involved in the broader effort of resource management. Your own household and estates would contribute significantly, and you would encourage other noble families to do the same. You are in effect a vital part of the imperial quartermaster team, ensuring that this great wave of humanity can actually move and fight. A quirky and important aspect of Ethiopian military campaigns was the role of women in the army encampments. Beyond those very rare noble women like yourself who might lead their own troops or take a more direct command role, many women accompanied the armies. They were responsible for preparing food, like the essential injera, carrying water, tending to the wounded, and crucially providing moral support. They would sing war songs, hurl encouraging words or taunts at the enemy, and generally maintain the spirits of the fighting men. This female presence was an integral part of the Ethiopian military tradition. The mood across Ethiopia is a potent brew of patriotic fervor, grim determination, and a degree of anxiety. The Italians are a European power, presumably with superior weaponry and military discipline. But Ethiopia has its mountains, its vast numbers, its knowledge of the terrain, and an unshakable belief in the righteousness of its cause. Under your inspiring influence, Taytu and Menelik's leadership, the nation is mobilizing not just its warriors, but its very soul for the struggle ahead. The call to arms has been answered. The road to Adwa is opening. The great mobilization is complete, Taytu. Ethiopia has answered your and Menelik's call. A vast sprawling river of humanity, tens of thousands strong, now flows northward from Addis Ababa and the surrounding regions heading towards the northern province of Tigray. This is where the Italian forces under General Oreste Baratieri are advancing from their Eritrean colony, confident in their European military superiority, and eager for a swift, decisive victory to cement Italy's colonial claims. The Ethiopian army marching north was less a single neat column of identically uniformed soldiers, and more like an entire nation deciding to embark on an incredibly long, arduous, and heavily armed group hike. The logistics alone, coordinating food, water, and shelter for such a multitude, would give a modern military planner a series of stress-induced migraines. You are not merely observing this immense undertaking from afar, you are an integral part of it. You march with the army at the head of your own formidable contingent of soldiers. Estimates vary, but it's believed you commanded a force of several thousand fighting men, possibly including artillery, a significant personal army. This isn't just a ceremonial guard. These are warriors loyal to you, ready to fight under your banner. Your presence is a powerful symbol. The Empress herself is enduring the hardships of the campaign, sharing the fate of her people. Imagine yourself on that long trek, the dust, the heat of the day, the chill of the highland nights, the constant murmur of thousands of voices, the clatter of weapons, the scent of wood smoke from countless campfires. As the Ethiopian forces move north, you continue to be a vital part of Menelik's inner war council. Your strategic mind, your understanding of the terrain, particularly the northern regions, your ancestral home, and your unwavering resolve are invaluable. While General Baratieri is being prodded by an impatient Italian government in Rome to achieve a quick victory and is notoriously underestimating Ethiopian numbers, fighting spirit, and leadership, you and Menelik are engaged in careful planning. Italian intelligence before Adwa was so comically bad, they probably thought your personal army Taytu was just there to oversee the catering and ensure everyone had enough TJ after a presumed Italian victory. Big mistake. Huge. A mainstream historical fact is that Empress Taytu Betul was present at the Battle of Adwa on March 1, 1896, commanding her own contingent of soldiers and playing an advisory role to Emperor Menelik II, contributing significantly to the decisive Ethiopian victory. She wasn't just a figurehead, she was an active participant in the strategic decisions that led to one of the most significant military triumphs in African history. By late February 1896, the Ethiopian army has taken up a strong defensive position in the hills and mountains around the town of Adwa in Tigray. The Italians, meanwhile, are facing dwindling supplies and increasing pressure from Rome to engage. One of your most lauded strategic contributions, Taytu, is said to have come during this crucial period. Accounts suggest you strongly advocated for holding the strategically advantageous ground, forcing the overconfident Italians to attack on terrain favorable to the Ethiopian defenders. Some sources even credit you with the idea of maneuvering to control key water sources, further pressuring the Italian forces. The precise nature and extent of Empress Taytu's direct tactical command during the Battle of Adwa itself are subjects of some historical discussion, as contemporary accounts often focused on the emperor and his male generals. However, her strategic influence in the preceding councils of war and her inspirational leadership of her own forces are widely acknowledged by historians. On the fateful day of March 1, 1896, the Battle of Adwa begins. General Baratieri, misinformed about Ethiopian positions and their state of readiness, orders his forces to advance in 3 separate columns. In the difficult, broken terrain, these columns become separated and uncoordinated. The Ethiopians, vastly outnumbering the Italians and fighting with the ferocity of those defending their homeland, exploit these errors with devastating effect. You, Taytu, are in the heart of it, not cowering in the rear, but actively involved. Taytu wasn't just at Adwa to look regal and wave a decorative fan. She was there with her own thousands of troops, likely positioned at a key sector of the battlefield, directing her forces, perhaps even her artillery, if she had managed to bring some pieces that far. Her personal banner, a distinct standard identifying her contingent, would have been a visible rallying point for her soldiers and a symbol of defiance to the enemy. Imagine her, a figure of immense authority and courage, issuing commands, her voice cutting through the din of battle, encouraging her warriors, her presence a testament to Ethiopia's resolve. The fighting is fierce and brutal. Ethiopian warriors, many armed with modern rifles but also employing traditional tactics and weapons with great effect, overwhelm the Italian columns one by one. The terrain that the Italians found so confusing is familiar ground to the Ethiopians. The battle rages for hours, but by the end of the day, the outcome is stunningly clear: a catastrophic defeat for the Italians and a glorious, almost unbelievable victory for Ethiopia. Your contribution, Taytu, is undeniable. From your early unwavering resistance to Italian encroachment to your pivotal role in mobilization, to your strategic insights and courageous presence on the battlefield itself, you have been instrumental in this historic triumph. A quirky tidbit often mentioned is the vital role of Ethiopian women in general during the battle, not just as distant supporters, but closer to the action, supplying water to the fighters, a critical task in the heat and dust, tending to the wounded under fire, and ululating war cries that both encouraged their own men and unnerved the enemy. You, as Empress and Commander, embodied the pinnacle of this female martial spirit. Adwa is more than just a military victory. It's a vindication of Ethiopia's sovereignty, a beacon of hope for colonized peoples across Africa and the world, and a testament to the extraordinary leadership of figures like yourself and Menelik. The new flower of Addis Ababa, which you helped to plant, is now secured by the iron will you displayed at Adwa. The dust of Adwa begins to settle Taytu, revealing a scene of almost unbelievable triumph for Ethiopia and a catastrophic, humiliating defeat for Italy. The sheer scale of your victory is stunning. Thousands of Italian soldiers are dead or wounded, and thousands more are taken prisoner. Their modern artillery, their rifles, their ambitions, all lie shattered on the plains and hills around Adwa. For Ethiopia, the initial shock of battle gives way to waves of elation, relief, and profound gratitude. The threat that has loomed for so long has been decisively, miraculously repelled. News of Adwa reverberates across the globe like a thunderclap. Back in Italy, the reaction is one of national shock and outrage. The Crispi government, which had pushed so aggressively for colonial expansion and underestimated Ethiopian resolve, collapses under the weight of the disaster. Generals are disgraced, careers are ruined, and the Italian public is forced to confront the bitter reality that their army has been crushed by an African power. It was a national Mamma Mia moment of epic proportions. There's no way to spin this one. It's an unmitigated disaster for Italian colonial pride. For Ethiopia and for you and Menelik personally, Adwa is the ultimate vindication. A mainstream historical fact is that the Ethiopian victory at the Battle of Adwa in 1896 compelled Italy to negotiate a new treaty, the Treaty of Addis Ababa, signed in October 1896, which unequivocally annulled the Treaty of Wuchale and recognized the absolute sovereignty and independence of Ethiopia. Italy was even forced to pay indemnities. Imagine the satisfaction, Taytu, as the new treaty is drawn up. When the Italian negotiators returned humbled and defeated, you can be sure your influence was keenly felt. You were likely there, a formidable presence, ensuring that every clause, every word reflected Ethiopia's hard-won victory and left no room for the kind of linguistic trickery that had characterized Article 7. No more funny business with conveniently ambiguous verbs. Thank you very much. Very. Your own reputation, Taytu, already formidable, soars to new heights. Your steadfastness in the face of Italian demands your early and unwavering suspicion of their intentions. Your crucial role in exposing the deceit of Wuchale and your forceful advocacy for resistance are now seen as prophetic. After Adwa, your "I told you so" aura was probably so powerful it could have powered Addis Ababa's streetlights if they'd had them yet. People remember your courage, your wisdom, your unshakable patriotism. You weren't just the emperor's wife. You were a national heroine, a co-architect of this monumental victory. Your active command of troops on the battlefield itself cements your image as a warrior queen, a true defender of her people. The precise degree of Empress Taytu's direct influence on the specific articles of the Treaty of Addis Ababa is a subject of historical inquiry, as official negotiations are often documented through the emperor and his chief ministers. But her well-documented strong stance against any infringement on Ethiopian sovereignty undoubtedly shaped the environment in which the negotiations took place, ensuring there would be no compromise on fundamental issues. Your voice, a consistent champion for Ethiopia's complete independence, would have been a powerful force ensuring that the terms of peace were just and unambiguous. The victory at Adwa also brought a more practical, if somewhat ironic, benefit. A quirky tidbit from the aftermath is that the vast quantities of captured Italian weaponry, rifles, cannons, ammunition, and other supplies, significantly rearmed and further modernized the Ethiopian military. It was a case of the would-be colonizer inadvertently providing the tools for their own defeat and for the future defense of the nation they failed to conquer. Thanks for the upgrade. Italy will be sure to put these lovely modern weapons to good use, protecting the sovereignty you now formally recognize. Regarding the thousands of Italian prisoners of war, a complex issue arose. while Eritrean Askari colonial troops who fought with the Italians were often treated harshly as traitors by the Ethiopians. There are indications that Taytu may have advocated for relatively more humane treatment of the Italian national soldiers. This doesn't mean they had a pleasant time. Conditions were undoubtedly harsh, but it suggests a degree of pragmatism and perhaps a strategic understanding that excessive cruelty could be counterproductive in the long run. This aspect of your character, balancing fierceness in defense of your nation with a capacity for calculated magnanimity, adds another layer to your complex persona. Internationally, Adwa sends shockwaves through colonial empires and colonized peoples alike. It challenges the prevailing narrative of European racial superiority and military invincibility. Ethiopia becomes a beacon of hope, a symbol of successful African resistance. Diplomatically, Ethiopia is catapulted onto the world stage with newfound respect and prestige. Other European powers, while perhaps chagrined by Italy's humiliation, become markedly more cautious and respectful in their dealings with Menelik's Ethiopia. They recognize it as a power to be reckoned with, an ancient kingdom that has fiercely and successfully defended its liberty. Your steadfastness. Taytu, from those early days of questioning Italian motives through the tense crisis of the Wuchale Treaty, your rallying call for mobilization and your courageous leadership at Adwa has been a golden thread in this tapestry of national triumph. You have not only helped to save your country from colonial subjugation, but have also cemented your own legacy as one of Ethiopia's most astute, courageous, and influential leaders. The diplomatic triumph that followed the military victory at Adwa was built firmly on the foundation of your unwavering resolve. The echoes of Adwa have resounded around the world. Taytu and Ethiopia now stands as a unique beacon of independence on the African continent, its sovereignty hard-won and fiercely defended. In the years that follow this monumental victory, roughly from the late 1890s into the early 1900s, you find yourself at the absolute zenith of your power and influence as Empress of Ethiopia. Menelik II is the undisputed emperor, revered by his people. But you, his Empress consort, are widely recognized, not just as his wife, but as a powerful political force in your own right, a co-architect of Ethiopia's destiny. If Menelik was the emperor and chairman of the board, you were undoubtedly the empress and chief operating officer of the Ethiopian empire. Very little happened without your knowledge and often your explicit approval. Your counsel to Menelik, always valued, becomes even more indispensable. You are a fixture in discussions of state affairs. Your sharp intellect and unwavering patriotism, shaping policy on everything from internal administration to complex foreign relations. Historians continue to assess the full extent of Empress Taytu's de facto political power, with some portraying her as a co-equal ruler with Menelik in his later years, especially as his health began to decline, while others emphasize her role as an exceptionally influential consort, highlighting the complexities of power dynamics within the imperial court. Regardless of the precise label, your hand is clearly visible in the governance of the empire. You have your own court, your own network of loyal officials, and considerable influence over appointments and dismissals. Those who earned your trust and respect found their careers flourishing. Those who incurred your displeasure often found their ambitions mysteriously thwarted, perhaps with their favorite ceremonial mule suddenly reassigned to less glamorous duties. In matters of foreign policy, you remain a steadfast guardian of Ethiopian interests, a hardliner when it comes to any perceived encroachment by foreign powers. The victory at Adwa has not made you complacent. If anything, it has reinforced your conviction that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. You scrutinize every treaty, every proposal from European envoys with that famous skepticism that served Ethiopia so well in the Wuchale crisis. Your memory is long and your commitment to Ethiopian sovereignty absolute, but your influence extends far beyond diplomacy. You take a keen interest in the internal administration of the empire in matters of justice, and in the continued development of your beloved Addis Ababa. You had a vision for the new flower from its inception, and now, with the empire secure, you pour your energy into making it a fitting capital. You encourage the construction of permanent buildings, the laying out of roads, and the establishment of modern amenities. A mainstream historical fact is that Empress Taytu Betul wielded considerable political power and influence during Menelik Tiku's reign, particularly in these areas. And most famously, she was instrumental in founding the first modern hotel in Ethiopia, the Ethiopia Hotel Taytu around 1907, using the current date of May 2025 as a reference for around that period. This was a landmark achievement, providing proper accommodation for the increasing number of foreign diplomats and visitors drawn to Ethiopia after Adwa, and also serving as a modernizing influence within Ethiopian society itself. Taytu decided Addis Ababa needed a proper hotel, probably because she was tired of visiting dignitaries, subtly complaining about the rustic nature of their accommodations. So with characteristic decisiveness, she built one. It was like a silent message. You can come and be impressed by our ancient independent empire, and you can do it from a room with decent sanitation and perhaps even a passable attempt at a continental breakfast. A quirky tidbit that speaks to your character is your renowned sharp wit and your unwillingness to suffer fools gladly, no matter their rank. There are many anecdotes of you delivering pointed remarks or cleverly deflating the pomposity of officials or foreign envoys who presumed too much. You weren't afraid to speak your mind, and your intelligence, combined with your imperial authority, made your words carry immense weight. One can imagine you holding your own audiences separate from Menelik's more formal court where petitioners could appeal to you directly, a practice not uncommon for influential royal women, further cementing your personal connection with the people and your independent power base. Of course, being at the pinnacle of power also means facing challenges and attracting opposition. Not everyone appreciated your strong will or your uncompromising stance. Navigating the intricate politics of the Ethiopian court with you Taytu at the height of your influence was like playing a high-stakes game of center-edge Ethiopian chess on a board that was also a tightrope over a pit filled with very grumpy crocodiles. You had to be astute, loyal, and extremely careful not to cross the Empress. Those whose ambitions were checked by your influence, or who favored a more conciliatory approach to foreign powers, might have viewed you as overly harsh or obstructive. Moreover, concerns about the imperial succession begin to surface. Menelik has no direct legitimate male heir who has reached majority. His acknowledged daughter is Zewdetu, and his designated though young grandson and heir is Lij Iyasu. In such an environment, the question of who will wield power after Menelik becomes increasingly pertinent, and your own role in that future is a subject of much speculation and maneuvering within the court. Despite these undercurrents, this period is largely one of peace and consolidation for Ethiopia, a time when the nation reaps the rewards of Adwa. You Taytu are central to this era, a figure of immense power, a patriot, a modernizer in your own distinct way, and a relentless defender of Ethiopian dignity. Your mark on Addis Ababa, on Ethiopian governance, and on the very spirit of the nation is indelible. You are at the height of your imperial power. Taytu, a respected and formidable empress, your influence woven into the very fabric of Ethiopian governance. But the winds of fate are beginning to shift, bringing with them a period of profound uncertainty and challenge. Starting around 1906, and more significantly from 1908 onwards, your beloved husband, Emperor Menelik II, the architect of modern Ethiopia, and your partner in so many triumphs begins to suffer a series of debilitating strokes. His formidable intellect starts to cloud. His strong body weakens. The Lion of Shiwa, the victor of Adwa, is slowly, inexorably fading. This is a period of deep personal sorrow for you, but also one of immense political consequence for the empire. As Menelik's health declines, you Taytu increasingly step into the void. This isn't a sudden coup or a formal publicly declared regency at first. It's a pragmatic and, for many, natural extension of the immense influence you already wield. With Menelik often incapacitated, someone needs to manage the day-to-day affairs of the empire to make decisions to ensure stability. And who better than you, his most trusted confidant, a proven leader with an unparalleled understanding of statecraft? You effectively become the acting ruler of Ethiopia. With Menelik unwell, you basically became the imperial remote control for the Ethiopian government. You were expertly changing the channels of policy, judiciously muting troublesome court factions, and occasionally hitting the do not disturb button on the entire empire when deep thinking was required. A mainstream historical fact is that as Emperor Menelik II's health deteriorated significantly from around 1908, Empress Taytu assumed a dominant role in governing the Ethiopian empire, effectively acting as regent. and making key political decisions. You are now the one meeting with foreign envoys, instructing ministers, approving appointments, and trying to keep the complex machinery of the Ethiopian state running smoothly. Your well-known conservative and fiercely nationalist views become even more pronounced in your policies. You are determined to protect Ethiopia's sovereignty and the legacy you and Menelik have built, especially now when the empire might appear vulnerable to external pressures or internal fragmentation. Foreign legations in Addis Ababa are watching with hawk-like intensity, perhaps sensing an opportunity in Menelik's decline. Your vigilance, already legendary, has to be sharper than ever. However, your assumption of de facto power is not without opposition. The precise moment Taytu's role transitioned from influential consort to de facto regent is debated by historians, as is the extent to which her actions were primarily motivated by a desire to maintain national stability during Menelik's incapacitation, versus consolidating her personal power and that of her faction. J. While many respect your abilities and your dedication to Ethiopia, others, particularly powerful Shiwan nobles who formed Menelik's traditional power base, begin to resent your dominance. They see you as an outsider, a northerner from Yeju and Semien, and they fear that you might try to sideline Menelik's chosen heir, his young grandson, Lij Iyasu, in favor of your own candidates or to perpetuate your own rule. The Ethiopian court during Menelik's illness became more dramatic than a primetime soap opera. Secret alliances were formed and dissolved. Backroom deals were struck with hushed urgency, and there was enough thinly veiled animosity and side-eye from rival nobles to power a small village for a year. You, Taytu, were right in the swirling center of this political tempest, probably wishing for a simple vote them off the Imperial Council option. These internal power struggles intensify. A council of ministers is formed, and in 1909 a significant move is made by the Shiwan aristocracy and other concerned nobles. Ras Tessima Nadu, a respected nobleman, is officially appointed as regent for the young Lij Iyasu. This is widely seen as a direct attempt to curb your authority, Taytu, to create a formal counterweight to your de facto rule. The political maneuvering becomes incredibly complex, a delicate balancing act. Your relationship with the young heir, Lij Iyasu, is also a key factor. You would naturally want to ensure the stability of the Solomonic succession. But you would also be concerned about maintaining your own influence and ensuring that the future emperor is guided by principles you hold dear. A quirky and often mentioned aspect of this period is how meticulously you were said to control access to the ailing emperor. Getting to see Menelik when he was seriously ill was reportedly harder than trying to get a personal audience with the Ark of the Covenant itself. Critics claimed this was a tactic to isolate Menelik, control the flow of information, and consolidate your own power by ensuring that all communication to and from the emperor passed through you. Supporters, however, would argue you were fiercely protecting your husband from undue stress and from those who might seek to exploit his weakened state for their own political gain. An appointment with the emperor, you say, let me just consult his very busy schedule, which, as it happens, is managed by me and currently indicates a strong no with a side of try again next millennium. He needs his rest, you understand. Despite the immense pressure, the political intrigues, and the personal grief of watching Menelik decline, you demonstrate remarkable resilience and political skill. You continue to govern, to make difficult decisions, and to fight to maintain the unity and integrity of the empire. But the forces arrayed against your unchecked power are growing. The very qualities that made you so effective, your strong will, your decisiveness, your uncompromising nature, are now used by your opponents to paint you as autocratic and overly ambitious. It is a deeply challenging time testing all of your formidable abilities. You are essentially trying to steer a massive ship through a gathering storm with a beloved but incapacitated captain, and a crew increasingly divided by suspicion and ambition. The immense pressures of your de facto regency, Taytu, coupled with the relentless anxieties surrounding Menelik's deteriorating health and the swirling ambitions within the court, eventually lead to a dramatic turning point. The coalition of powerful nobles, primarily from Shewa, who have grown increasingly wary of your unchecked authority, and your strong northern affiliations decide to act. In March 1910, in a carefully orchestrated political maneuver, rather than a violent overthrow, they effectively strip you of your powers as regent. The nobles who managed to sideline you probably had to plan it with the precision of a royal jewel heist, very carefully, like trying to defuse an exceptionally intelligent, politically astute, and slightly irritable imperial bomb. One wrong move and you might have outmaneuvered them all from your morning coffee. A mainstream historical fact is that in 1910, Empress Taytu Betul was politically marginalized by this influential group of nobles led by figures like Ras Tasema Nadu, who was already the official regent for Lija Iyasu, and was compelled to retire from active governance. The primary motivations were complex: a genuine desire to ensure a smooth succession for the young Lija Iyasu without your perceived dominance, resentment of your considerable power, which overshadowed many traditional power brokers, and perhaps a reaction to your uncompromising, sometimes seen as harsh style of leadership, which had alienated certain factions. The historical assessment of Empress Taytu's final period of power and her subsequent removal continues to evolve. Scholars still debate the balance between the genuine threat her continued dominance posed to the established succession versus the political machinations of rivals eager to claim power in the uncertain transition. You are forced into a life of relative seclusion. Accounts vary as to the exact location. Some say you were confined to the old imperial palace on Mountain Toto, the very place you encouraged Menelik to leave for the warmer climes of Addis Ababa. Others suggest you retired to St. Mary's Church on Ntoto or to a residence in Addis Ababa, but significantly removed from the Gebi, the center of political power. Wherever it was, your direct involvement in the day-to-day running of the empire is over. It must have been an incredibly bitter pill to swallow for a woman of your intellect, energy, and profound commitment to Ethiopia. Yet by all accounts, you bear this forced retirement with dignity. Your days are now filled with prayer, quiet reflection, and perhaps managing your personal affairs, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of imperial governance you had helmed for so long. In December 1913, Menelik II, your husband, your partner, the great emperor you had stood beside and advised for 3 decades, finally passes away. His death marks the definitive end of an era you had so profoundly shaped. Your grief must have been immense, a personal loss compounded by the knowledge that the Ethiopia you both struggled to build and protect was entering a new, uncertain phase under his young and largely untested successor, Lija Iyasu. You outlived Menelik by several years, passing away on February 11, 1918. Even in your seclusion, you remained a figure of immense respect and perhaps a little lingering awe for many Ethiopians. A quirky tidbit suggests that even after being removed from power, ordinary people and even some officials might have discreetly sought you out for your blessing, your wisdom, or simply to pay homage to the formidable empress who had stared down the Italians and helped save the nation. Your residence, wherever it was, likely became a quiet pilgrimage site for those who revered your unwavering patriotism and strength. Even in seclusion, you were probably still more influential in spirit than many actively scrambling for position. One can imagine people still trying to get your opinion on vital matters, perhaps through very discreetly delivered messages or through trusted intermediaries. The Great Etech sends her warmest regards, and also subtly suggests that your proposed new land tax policy is, with all due respect, a flaming disaster waiting to happen. Your legacy, Taytu Betul, is vast, complex, and enduring. It's like one of those incredibly intricate Ethiopian Shema fabrics, woven with threads of brilliant gold for your patriotism and strategic genius, deep scarlet for your courage and warrior spirit. Perhaps some stern black for your uncompromising nature and the fear you inspired in your enemies, and a whole lot of Ethiopia first woven throughout. It's not a simple, easily defined legacy, but it is undeniably magnificent. You are remembered as a fierce patriot, a stalwart defender of Ethiopian sovereignty against colonial aggression. Your role before, during, and after the Battle of Adwa is legendary, a cornerstone of Ethiopia's proud history of independence. You were a modernizer in your own right, particularly in your contributions to the development of Addis Ababa, most notably with the founding of the Taytu Hotel. You were a symbol of female power in a patriarchal world, an intelligent, courageous, and decisive leader who commanded armies and shaped the policies of an empire. Yet your legacy also has its more debated aspects. Your detractors, both contemporary and later, viewed you as uncompromising, to a fault, even harsh. They accused you of being power-hungry, especially during your de facto regency, and of favoring your own northern relatives and allies in political appointments. These criticisms are part of your story, reflecting the contentious nature of power and the enmities that strong leadership often attracts. But whatever the complexities and controversies, your indelible mark on Ethiopian history is undeniable. You stood firm when others might have wavered. You saw clearly when others were blinded by ambition or fear, and you fought tirelessly for the dignity and independence of your nation. Empress Taytu Betul, the light of Ethiopia. Your story continues to inspire and resonate, a testament to the enduring power of courage, intellect, and unwavering love for one's country.